Here are the immediate reactions of what we saw from week 2 and what you can expect moving into week 3 because almost everything changed and there are some really big important storylines to follow coming into week 3, starting out with the Browns situation. It might not seem like it's too big with fantasy football importance, but when we look at what we have, Quinshon Judkins was activated for this game, meaning he is fully healthy and he is ready to go. And if you look at week 1, the split in this backfield, there is some value here. The 4th round rookie Dylan Sampson played on early downs in week 1. Jerome Ford played pretty much everything else on third downs. However, Dylan Sampson got a majority of the receiving role. He had 8 receptions, which is absolutely insane. And then we come into week 2. Again, Quinshon Judkins was activated to the 53-man roster. He was expected to only play 10 to 15 snaps. That's what we heard from the coaches. Well, Judkins comes out, becomes the Browns' primary early down running back, although it was a completely ugly 3 running back committee system. He was playing and taking time away from Jerome Ford and Dylan Sampson. If you look at the running back splits here, we look at the difference here. Jerome Ford, 35 out of the 73 total snaps. Quinshon Judkins has 19. Dylan Sampson has 18. And the snap shares, respectively, here show that. Early downs, it was pretty much split evenly. All of them were about a 30% on that. On the late downs, which means third downs, it was all Jerome Ford. 84% of his snaps were the late down snaps. And in 2-minute drill, he also had 83% of those. Short yardage was pretty much split between everybody else. But more importantly, when you look at the garbage time snaps, Jerome Ford dominated in that. 47% of his time on field came in garbage time. Now, the Browns got absolutely destroyed, so a majority of this game was garbage time. When you look at their routes run, Jerome Ford, 26, Quinshon Judkins, 8, Dylan Sampson, 12. It's just going to be a complete committee as far as that goes, but Quinshon Judkins is the guy that I am going for. He led this team in carries with 10 compared to Jerome Ford at 6 and Dylan Sampson with 4. Everything was split, but again, he's going to be the guy I want in the weeks to come. But what we can get away from is Harold Fannin and David Njoku. The differences between them split just a little bit. When you look into their snaps, they both did relatively decent. If you look at their fantasy points, it was fine for both of them, but we need to unlock and go into where they were actually being used on field. David Njoku played 27 of the 36 total snaps in single tight end sets. David Njoku is clearly still the number 1 tight end compared to Fannin, particularly on third downs. Njoku had 7 of the 9 third down snaps, so it's definitely his role. But when you look at Fannin, he's getting put in the slot. He's getting used even in the backfield a couple times. So to maintain his fantasy value, you're going to have to hope that they keep running these 2 tight end sets. Again, last week they played 30. The week before that, they played 40% of their snaps in 2 tight ends. And they're not going to run 73 plays a game because the offense isn't just going to have this much catching up to do against the Ravens, which we saw. It was promising to see the Browns' commitment to the 12 personnel despite the game script. Again, when they're down, they're not going to be using as many 2 tight end sets because they need their wide receivers on the field, which is why we saw Cedric Tillman have a really good game. He is going to be in the waiver wire video, just a sneak peek to that. But as far as right now, a tight end that's only playing 63% of the snaps isn't going to be a super strong start when you have his tight end 1, David Njoku, playing over 80%. So just keep that in mind. When you look at the Ravens, there is something to be told here, and it is Mark Andrews, who is a complete non-factor despite the increased snap rate and there being no Isaiah Likely. Andrews only caught 1 pass from the Ravens' blowout victory of over 40 points. Andrews played 74.5% of Baltimore's offensive snaps. And the bad news is you can't really take his inefficiency as garbage time because he played 84.8% of his snaps before then. So heading into this season, Andrews was already going to be a pretty touchdown dependent tight end. He was top 5 in touchdown rate per catch per target. It just lowers the floor for him now that he cannot produce as the only tight end getting almost all of the routes. I'm not necessarily saying we should drop Mark Andrews, but in his first 2 games, he is not putting up good fantasy numbers, and I would not be starting him right now. But there are some good tight ends you can pick up off the waiver wire. I will be dropping that video tomorrow, so make sure to be subscribed. Hit that like button if you want to see that. But when we look at the Jaguars and the Cincinnati Bengals, we did learn a lot, primarily with this backfield, and that Bashaw Tutin is emerging as the primary backup here. It makes sense. The Jaguars got rid of Tank Bigsby earlier in the week. That means Tutin's role is going to be solidified. The Jaguars used 4 different running backs last week. Travis Etienne was obviously the main guy. He put up a bunch of fantasy numbers in all situations except for third downs, though, with 7th round rookie LaQuint Allen coming out here and serving as their third down running back. He's also decently good at the goal line too, so he's working in here. Now, Etienne did obviously play a higher snap percentage. We're expecting that, especially on the early downs, but LaQuint Allen took 10 of the 11 total third down snaps. That is not good as far as what we want to see for the running back workhorse situation of Travis Etienne or Bashal Tutin looking like that guy. In the 2-minute drill, it was all Travis Etienne in the entirety of it. When you look at the early downs, it was Travis Etienne getting 35 of the total snaps. You also had Bashal Tutin getting 11 of those snaps. And in short yardage, it was Travis Etienne and Bashal Tutin pretty much split. Now, this was Bashal Tutin's first technical game being like a real running back in this backfield, so I expect him to get a lot more usage. But when Tutin was on the field, he was getting the ball. He had 8 rushing attempts compared to Travis Etienne at 14, 42 rushing yards to his 71, and 15 to Travis Etienne's 18 fantasy points. So when you look at it and the numbers, Travis Etienne had 26 routes compared to LaQuint Allen and Bashal Tutin at 7. So like, just because the receiving numbers were there doesn't mean it was an equal opportunity. We saw the same thing in week 1. For now, Travis Etienne is still the workhorse, but Bashal Tutin needs to be rostered. I'm not worried about LaQuint Allen yet. If you're in a deeper league, maybe a dynasty league, yes, he's somebody I should roster. But as of right now, it's just somebody to keep your eye on. But with these wide receivers, it is definitely something that we need to note because Travis Hunter did not have a good game here. He did only play 42 of the total 71 snaps. He did play 43 snaps on defense. He was used a lot there. This is going to be something we can expect to see continuing. He's going to be more boom or bust depending on how much of the field he plays. But when you look at Brian Thomas Jr., he was not much better, only 8.9 fantasy points. He got outscored by Parker Washington. He got outscored by De'Ami Brown. Now, he did play more snaps and was on the field, and he actually out-targeted all of these guys as well. But it was a mix of him just not being able to catch passes. He did not look good at all. When you look at Brian Thomas Jr., 43 routes run compared to De'Ami Brown at 37, Travis Hunter at 27. When you're only running 27 routes, he got 6 targets. It's a decent target share. You got to be on the field, though. Brian Thomas Jr. had 11 targets on his 43. I'm not too worried about him. He did look bad, but he's going to be the number 1, and that's a guy that I want. He was also top 5 in air yard share this week. And a quick note about Brenton Strange. I know he didn't put up a lot of fantasy points last week against a really positive matchup with the Bengals, a guy that I was advocating to start, but the underlying numbers are there. He did play career high 90.1% of the offensive snaps for the Jaguars. Even Evan Ingram, when he was on this team last year, only saw 90% of the snaps twice. So it's definitely a green flag. I'm still rostering him. I'm still going to be starting him in the right matchups. Cowboys and the Giants very, very quickly here. Wan'Dale Robinson is a sneak peek for a guy that I'm going to have in my waiver wire video. Again, make sure to be subscribed for that. We did have Darius Slayton and Malik Neighbors tying with 66 snaps and 44 routes run. Darius Slayton only had 2 targets on that, though, while Malik Neighbors had 13, and Wan'Dale Robinson had 10 targets on his 47 snaps and 35 total routes run. He is a guy that I'm honestly liking. He's always been a target guy, a little bit low ADOT because he's been in the slot. He'll just get 5-yard receptions and not really be able to do too much with it, but he did get a decent amount of usage outside the numbers and had some really deep passes that he caught for a touchdown, obviously, that made his fantasy point day that much better. Now, obviously, 28 fantasy points is not going to be the norm for him. Russell Wilson did have 41 passing attempts. That's not going to happen. But 10 targets on 41 attempts is a very good target share up there with Malik Neighbors, and that's something I do like. And when you look at these running backs here with Cam Scatterbu and Tyrone Tracy, this is the reason we were avoiding Tyrone Tracy in drafts. Cam Scatterbu had 35 snaps compared to Tyrone Tracy at 28. When you look at their routes run, they were identical. Yes, Tyrone Tracy was playing less snaps, but he did have a decent number of routes. He did end up with more targets, but it's a good note that they had that tied up as well. But Cam Scatterbu, 11 carries to Tyrone Tracy's 5. This is not necessarily great for him. We're stashing Cam Scatterbu. He looks good. And when we go look at the Bears matchup, a lot of people are worried about DJ Moore and this entire wide receiver situation. Obviously, Rome Odunze did have the bigger week. 11 targets on 40 routes run and a couple touchdowns, which led him to have 31.8 fantasy points compared to DJ Moore at 9.6. You shouldn't be worried about DJ Moore, though, again, because he did pretty much tie Rome Odunze in snaps and routes. So it's going to be time to come when he gets used. Everybody else in this offense was miles below those two, so it's clearly them, even if the fantasy points don't necessarily reflect it. But one thing I do like here, Kyle Monungai's season might be around the corner. If you're in a deeper league, he's a guy I think you should stash. 28 snaps compared to DeAndre Swift at 39. They had an identical number of routes run out of the backfield, which means they're going to get the ball, and that's why Kyle Monungai only had 1 less target than DeAndre Swift did, and he even got 7 carries to DeAndre Swift's 12. We know Ben Johnson has historically, with the Lions at least, used a 2 running back system every single year, and they're both always top 25 in fantasy points scored. So he is a guy I like. I know in the beginning of the season I was saying that too, and he didn't get a lot of usage in week 1, but now might finally be the time for that. And when you look at this backfield situation for the New England Patriots, it is a little bit worrisome because we have Ramondre Stevenson taking so much more than we thought. He had 5 of the third down snaps. He had 4 of the 5 short yard snaps. He split the goal line carries completely with Travion Henderson, and he had 21 snaps on early downs. Overall, 32 total snaps compared to Travion at 11, and you had the other guys like Antonio Gibson in here as well. But looking at this Bills matchup with the Jets, Breece Hall is completely the stronghold #1 running back of this backfield. You look at week 1 to 2, Hall's playing time actually increased from 63 to 73% prior to the garbage time, at least before the Bills just absolutely ran away with this game. And looking at the Bills side of things, the most important thing here, the Bills returned to their usual wide receiver rotation of nobody being the #1 guy. I know Keon Coleman looked great last week, but no wide receiver on this team played more than 51% of the offensive snaps. In week 1, the Bills looked like they had a complete wide receiver one in Keon Coleman, 82% of the snaps. The ex-wide receiver, Khalil Shakir, played 95% of the snaps in most of 11 personnel. And you look at the Seahawks situation with the backfield, it might look really, really bad because you have Zach Charbonnet with 36 snaps compared to Kenneth Walker at 23. He also had 12 carries to Kenneth Walker's 6. It's just not looking good. He had more carries than Kenneth Walker did. And you look at the fantasy football points, Walker with 18, Zach Charbonnet only had 1. It is not relative of what actually happened because Zach Charbonnet was getting everything in this offense. It just didn't turn to fantasy football points. When you break down the usage splits, and this is really what's important for running backs, Zach Charbonnet had everything in the 2-minute drill. He had almost everything in the early down snaps compared to Kenneth Walker. But I do attribute this a little bit more to Kenneth Walker's foot injury than anything else. So just be aware of that. Zach Charbonnet is a must-have. Kenneth Walker, I might look to move after this week because the numbers might make it look good, but it really was not. And if you look at the Pittsburgh Steelers running back situation, there's a reason I did not have Kenneth Gainwell in the waiver wire ad video. It is a complete committee backfield. Kenneth Gainwell had more usage in the goal line, which is a positive. But how often are the Steelers really going to be at the goal line? They split evenly the 2-minute drill, the third downs, the short yardage with Kenneth Gainwell and Jaylen Warren. But Jaylen Warren actually led in total snaps. But another backfield I'm a little bit worried about is the Arizona Cardinals. James Conner. He did have more fantasy points, but he was not used as much as you'd hope in this such a positive matchup against the Carolina Panthers. He had 30 snaps compared to Trey Benson at 25. Look at the route run difference. Trey Benson ran more routes, and you can understand that if you watch the game. He had 4 targets because of that. Now, James Conner did lead in carries 11-3, but there really was not much going for him outside of the 1 touchdown that he did get. He got saved by that to get 12 fantasy points compared to Trey Benson at 8. Trey Benson is a guy you need to be stashing. Go over to the Broncos backfield here. It was completely split. You look at these two guys. J.K. Dobbins had 27 snaps compared to R.J. Harvey at 19. They were equal in routes run out of the backfield, but J.K. Dobbins got a majority of these carries, which led him to finish with more fantasy football points. That's understandable. R.J. Harvey really didn't have a good game. We can't start him until we see anything different with these usage splits. And I'll go into this. Nobody else on YouTube will get this deep. We have J.K. Dobbins getting 6 of the 7 total goal line snaps. On the early downs, it was split evenly between them. On the short yardage, though, it was J.K. Dobbins 100% of the time. And it was even Tyler Bidet in the 2-minute drill and third downs. We know Sean Payton likes to use these committee running back systems. He also likes to target his running backs a lot. But we can't start RJ Harvey until we see something different happen. But that is the majority of these really, really important notes and takeaways from week 1. Let me know if you guys want to see this video every week. All glory to the man above, and I will see you in the next waiver wire video coming tomorrow.